It is Thursday, September 21st, 2023, and you're listening to the MMA Eco Live podcast. And I'm your host, as usual, Chris Presnell, owner of MMA Ecosystem, and basically just spend all my time all day trying to report on Asian MMA, having a great time doing it. Also work for Tapology, putting in those fighter records. So welcome to the show if this is your first time or your 20, what episode are we on? Like 25, 26. Yeah, appreciate you joining. How this works is that I'm going to go over the Asian MMA schedule for the weekend. And then after that's done, about 15 minutes or so, then I'll transition to your questions. So whatever questions you have, you can drop those in the chat. I've got some moderators, I think, maybe didn't actually check in with them this week. If they're not here, that is fine, but I can kind of self-moderate it as well. But yeah, thanks so much for joining. Let's get into the Asian MMA schedule. If you have not already, subscribe to the channel. Would really appreciate it a lot. Trying to hit 1,000 subscriptions by the end of the year, and I think we're going to be able to do it. But in order to do that, especially if you're a frequent listener, subscribe to the channel. Would really appreciate it. But yeah, quite a bit going on this weekend. Nothing that's like earth-shattering, really, really big stuff like we had at the end of August with a lot of awesome events going on throughout Asia. But a lot going on this weekend, that's for sure. Even some stateside that I want to get to. So first up, the first order of business is One Friday Fights 34. A lot of stuff has gone down with that main event, that Muay Thai main event with Rodtang and Superlek. If you want to deep dive into that a lot more, definitely check out like South China Morning Post. They're your guys to cover that in full. But for me, kind of weird that I'm actually just touching on the first two fights of that event. But pretty solid. The quality of these MMA fights going down at One Friday Fights, I feel like has slowly been improving, at least in my eyes, of what interests me. So that's good to see. The two MMA fights are four Asian fighters fighting each other, which is cool. First off, we've got Chun Rui of China. He's fighting Shinik Chagta Zoltsitseg. Look at that. I mean, what other podcast do you listen to where a guy can just nail that pronunciation first try? I don't know of any. So yeah, so I'm pulling up these guys. Let me share my screen with you, and we can take a look at these guys, because some of these guys have been around one championship for a long time. Always interesting to me when they put some of these veterans on the Friday fight shows. I'm also really curious how those contracts work out. But yeah, okay, so we've got Lito Adawang from Philippines fighting Adrian Matais from Indonesia, and then we've got Chun Rui of China fighting Zoltsitseg of Mongolia. Lito Adawang from Philippines. Philippines can use all the good prospects they can get. As far as we know, this guy's still at Team Wakai. Team Wakai kind of had a lot of departures over the last year, but Lito Adawang's still there. Although he is on a 2-fight losing streak, his losses to pretty good guys, Jared Brooks, Jeremy Miyato, Hiroba Minowa, all pretty solid losses. So yeah, he's been in one championship for a long time, ever since October 2018. So a veteran on a 2-fight losing streak fighting Adrian Matais, who is a pretty solid Indonesian prospect. The 11-6 record, goes by the nickname Papua Bad Boy. Both guys 30 years old. Kind of a checkered record for Matais, but he has been around for a long time as well. Coming off a sub 1 minute TKO finish over Zalong Joshi, Tibetan guy out of Umbo Fight. So yeah, both guys, Matais probably got a little bit more steam behind him, but That should be a good fight. Both guys have a lot of knockouts to the record. That should be a lot of fun. And then we've also got this other fight, Chun Roy, who's also been in one championship for a long time. I believe I just added another fight to this guy's record. Can't remember if it was a win or a loss, but I did just add that. So I'll be interested to see if that is reflected tomorrow. But this is an interesting fight. Really, Chun Roy's got a lot of solid wins on here. He's got a win over Direct Sambawaga most recently, Muhammad Ayman, Ali Mutamed, Mark Abelardo, and then lost to some pretty good guys as well. Sung Min Chong, Jeremy Pakatu, Quang, and Troy Worthen. So kind of a mid-tier fighter, and then he's fighting this Mongolian guy, Zoltateg, and I believe his record is not all that impressive, but he's a lot better than he looks, I think. Yeah, he got off to a pretty good start with one championship, going 5-1, and then fought some pretty good dudes in his last couple fights. And yeah, with that record, one of those losses is to an illegal kick. So not quite what it seems, but that should be an interesting fight as well. And then I'm sure that main event will be all types of interesting, one way or another. A lot of weird narratives going into that main event. Not all of them particularly flattering. So interesting show going on tomorrow from Bangkok's Lumpini Stadium. I'm not going to get into it too deeply, but we've got an interesting story going on at LFA 168 tomorrow, where does that go down? Is that Prior Lake, Minnesota, LFA 168. And the interesting thing there is these two Vietnamese guys got Tuan Ho fighting Kendrick Latchman and Quang Le fighting Saul Guerrero. Both of these Vietnamese guys are undefeated. Tuan Ho 4-0, Quang Le is 5-0, I believe. So both guys are taking a step up against at least competition that is much more experienced. This is, like, I believe Tuan Ho's last fight when he was 3-0 was against Edwin De Los Santos, who was 2-1 at the time. Kendrick Latchman is 9-9, so fighting a much more experienced fighter. Really, I think, great matchmaking all throughout his tenure at LFA. Really like that they're giving him a guy that's like kind of an even record, but much more experienced, perfect for a young 22-year-old who's just 4-0. I like it. And then Quang Le, I'm not sure how to, at some point, it's like on my mind to do like a Vietnamese language pronunciation guide, because I really need to know how to properly pronounce these names. But Quang Le, a little bit older, he's 31 years old, but 5-0. If he beats this guy, he's sitting at 6-0, and got that inroad with LFA. Could be some big things to come for really both these guys if they win these fights, especially in impressive fashion. Vietnam is slowly and quietly finding its place in the broader MMA scene. I would say there's 4 prospects, I would say. And then there's a couple guys that are like Vietnamese but are natives of other countries, thinking about like Martin Nguyen and Stephen Nguyen, who just got a UFC contract at Contender Series. But yeah, these two guys actually like born and raised in Vietnam and wave the Vietnamese flag. So yeah, always love seeing that, guys repping countries that don't have a whole lot of representation in MMA, especially when they're solid prospects that are undefeated. So like what I see out of them so far. See if they can keep that undefeated streak going. And then we've also got Octagon 50 going down. Is that from Almaty, Kazakhstan? That's right. Really, the only thing I'll touch on there is that got Damir Tolanov fighting, who I believe he's 11-0. So he's another Kazakh prospect to add on to your list. He's also one of these Kazakh guys that's like got this really great record that is fighting in these promotions like like Alash Pride or Octagon or Niza, who has this really good record, and you feel like he's just perpetually one fight away from the UFC. He's not fighting for titles, but he's just kind of fighting like in these holdover fights. So that kind of feels that way with Tolanov as well. He's fighting this Brazilian guy, Claudio Brito. So yeah, I expect this should be a fairly easy fight for Tolanov. Going to add to his undefeated record and potentially see him in somewhere like the UFC next year. The main event of that Octagon 50 show is Georgi Kichigin versus Richard Totorov, fighting for the middleweight title. Don't really know, I would say, anything about either of these guys. So yeah, should be interesting. Octagon always has some good highlights. So, and then I'm still trying to find out about this show, but there apparently is a show in China having their third show called Qualchon Fights. It's Qalqan. Hard to find info about these guys, but they will often have a lot of like either Kazakh guys, both ethnic and national Kazakh nationals fighting like ethnic Kazakh but Chinese national guys. So, and that will usually take place somewhere like in far west Xinjiang province, right near the border. So I'll try to find out more info about that. Sometimes you hear about these shows and it's hard to get details about them, and then they get canceled. So I kind of like wait to really put out a lot of stuff. Like even now I've like held off a little bit more, even putting them on Tapology, just because I'll put them up there and then they'll get canceled. You'll hear about it and then you'll never hear about it again, whether it's results or whatever. So, but speaking of China, got JCK Fight Night 69 going down from the JCK headquarters. Not a whole lot on this card that I'll highlight. The co-main event is worthy of highlighting. That is the main event is Jimmy Wu Sha versus Zheng Xiaoliang. The co-main event is a Tibetan guy, Nika Dan, fighting Hailai Arka and E guy. So you got Tibetan guy versus E. So both those guys, pretty good prospects, a couple fights away from where I would call them like UFC ready. So yeah, cool that we're getting it's like a really good prospect versus prospect fight. But yeah, both guys kind of had a stumble or two in the last year or so, but I think Hailai Arka, he trains under Wukuo Yoga's E-Fight gym, and then I think Niga Dan has been both at Umbo Fight and maybe a little bit at the UFC PI in Shanghai. So yeah, that will go down on JCK's social media channels. Apart from that, sorry, I forgot to put up the banner there. The only other thing Saturday is this UFC show, UFC Fight Night. Was it Kazib versus Gamrot? And then also on the card, you've got the return of Mizuki Inoue. So Mizuki, gosh, I remember her from forever ago. I used to love watching her in Invicta FC. Just like every fight she was in. Like the one I specifically remember is the Alexa Grasso fight, who's UFC flyweight champion now, and then also fought Karolina Kowalkiewicz. Like her resume pre-UFC is so good, and I think her record now is like something like 14-6. Like it's not the flashiest record, but she started at such a young age. I think I just did like a write-up for her for my Instagram page today, but she was fighting pro like kickboxing, shoot boxing at age 15, and then I think went pro at age 18 or 19 in MMA. So, and she has fought so much like tough competition. So really like her best years could be ahead of her. She's something like 27 or 28 or 29 now. So she had ACL surgery 3 years ago, and so she's been out. And I was just like, man, have I ever like done anything on Mizuki? And I was like, no. And the reason for that is because she has literally been injured the whole time I've worked in MMA media. She's been injured. So I was like, yeah, that's why I've never done anything for Mizuki's. because she's been injured for so long. She's never worn until this week a Venom outfit. All the photos I was looking through, she's in Reebok gear. She's like, which she's only fought twice in the UFC. She fought, her last fight was against Amanda Lemos, who we now know is pretty good. Not like, I mean, we saw what happened with Amanda against John Wei Lee, but yeah, Mizuki, she's got really good boxing and pretty good grappling too. And you know, she's been grinding away at the Sarah Longo or Longo Weidman gym in New York for like years now. So really excited to see what we'll see from her. She's fighting Hannah Goldie, and Goldie is dropping down to strawweight, which shocks me because she is like one of the more muscular women in the whole UFC. It even like shocked me that she could cut down to flyweight, but apparently she's cutting down to strawweight for this fight. So that could be really interesting. I'll be interested to watch the weigh-in for both fighters tomorrow, since Mizuki hasn't made weight in 3 years. Hannah Goldie, really like physically strong fighter, cutting down a weight class. So that could be interesting to watch. Hopefully nothing weird happening at the weigh-ins. But yeah, I'll be watching to see if like both of their conditioning, what it's like. Could be interesting. I lean Mizuki in this fight, but there's a lot of unknowns with her coming back and with the weight cut for Hannah Goldie. So yeah, that should be good. Excited for that one. And I believe that's the only Asian fighter on that card. Other than that, you've got on Sunday, you've got quite a bit going on in the JMMA world. Got Pancrase 337 and Shooto going down. And I think it's like the Pancrase, maybe like, 30-year anniversary, which is crazy. At Pancrase, you've got Naoki Hirata, who is Atsuki Hirata's brother. Both of them also train at Longo Weidman in New York. And Naoki Hirata, like, slowly coming along as a decent prospect. So that's cool. But yeah, so you've got Naoki Hirata. You've also got one of the best amateur prospects in all of MMA making his pro debut at this Pancrase show. That is Ryo Yamaguchi, who trains at Tiger Muay Thai. Really, really sharp Japanese prospect who had a very long amateur career. Is now going pro at this Pancrase event. So that'll be something to watch. Karen Date is also fighting at Pancrase 337. And then at the Shooto event, 2 names to bring to your attention. Both of Road to UFC connection. First is Yuma Horiuchi, who always is in pretty exciting fights. Had that amazing fight with Carlos Mota for the LFA flyweight title last year or 2 years ago. One of the best fights you'll ever see. He is back in action, I believe, the first time him fighting in Japan in a long time. And then Takeru Uchida, who is like really, really young Japanese guy who looked good at Road to UFC, and then he got submitted, I believe, in his last fight. So, but still in the conversation of one of those really hyper young Japanese prospects that we have our eyes on. So yeah, he's going to be bouncing back after that loss. Interested to see both those guys. Really enjoy watching both Yuma and Takeru a lot. So a couple other, and of course, can't forget Rizin 44. Not a whole lot that jumps off the page from Rizin this weekend, but a few things. Overall, should be some really fun fights. Should be really fun fights. I'm going to read off to you and show you the fight card here in a second, because I do really like this card. Not a whole lot going down in terms of like star power or highly like super influential fights in the broader scheme of things. But yeah, so let's take a look at Rizin 44. So this goes down from Saitama Super Arena in Tokyo, or Saitama. The main event, which I thought was a title fight, I don't think we have this marked as a title fight though, is Kleber Koike Herbst fighting Masanori Kanehara. Yeah, should be an interesting fight. Co-main event, you've got Juntaro Ushiku fighting Kyohei Hagiwara. Kind of a weird fight for me. I feel like this should be Ushiku's fight. And then also got Spike Carlisle against Yoshinori Hori. That should be really fun. Spike Carlisle has always been a ton of fun, especially in Rizin. This should be absolute mayhem. Tsuyoshi Sudario fighting Todd Duffy. That's all types of wild. Patrick Shoasami fighting in a kickboxing fight. Also got Yoshiki Nakahara on the card. Ersan Yamamoto. And then, yeah, opening up the card is Ramazan, or I guess his name is Ramazanbek Temirov, one of like the top Uzbek prospects opening up the card. So excited to see him fight. He had a really great debut in Rizin last time around. So yeah, overall, not like the most impactful Rizin card, but I think it should be really entertaining. Probably some fun finishes. Honestly, a lot of guys I don't know a whole lot about on here, so let's see if anyone stands out. I want to cover a few just like odds and ends of Asian MMA news. I want to try and do that more and more on shows. Nothing that no breaking news or anything like that. But last weekend we did have that Deep versus Black Combat show in Japan, and I was really surprised. I mean, you looked at the results, which are, on my page. I also put out like a YouTube short and TikTok video kind of covering the results. But probably the most surprising was Park Se-yoon beating Saori Oshima by a unanimous decision. Park really wasn't on a lot of people's radar before this fight, and I think a lot of people were picking Saori Oshima to cruise in that fight. But yeah, Park looked great, had a really good right hand that she tagged Oshima with over and over, and improved to 4-3. But with that record is honestly one of like the top female prospects out of Korea right now. That was a really big win. Choi Jun-seo, another knockout to his record. One of the top middleweight fighters out of Korea, probably like the top middleweight out of Korea right now. Juri Ohara getting finished as well. Yeah, overall Team Korea beats Team Japan 5-2, winning the last 5 fights. So yeah, good stuff out of there. I need to check out what Black Combat has been putting out on there. And then the other thing I wanted to cover was at the Contender Series post-fight press conference this week, Dana White briefly touched on UFC China, which, as you know, I've been talking a lot about. Reported last week that Shanghai was the targeted city, which I do need to remind all of you that targeted does not mean the same as official, right? Targeted means that is the UFC's first choice for the location of that event, but it is not official. And then at the press conference this week, a guy, can't remember, I don't know which reporter asked Dana about it, but he asked Dana White about UFC China, and in particular, if we could see Zhang Weili versus Yan Xiaonan at that fight. And Dana gave a really weird, very confusing response. He kind of laughed it off and was like, I was actually gonna pull up the clip and show you guys so I didn't have to remember it. But yeah, he kind of just laughed it off and was like, is this where we're at now? We're asking about fights in China now? And he was just like, man, we're really at the bottom of the barrel here if we're asking about this kind of stuff way in the future. And then he was like, we wouldn't do that. He was like, we wouldn't do that fight in China. which was so confusing to me because for the record, I have not heard a single thing about Zhang Weili fighting or not fighting at that event. So it doesn't, like, him saying that was not against anything that I had heard in particular. I've heard like rumors about either like Li Jingliang or Song Yadong potential. I mean, like very loose, flimsy rumors, not like sure rumors, but yeah. All that to say, I don't know who's going to main event that show, but I saw a couple people in the media say that Dana White shot down UFC China as a whole, saying that they're not doing it. But I think if you go back and listen to the interview, I think he's more just annoyed that people are commenting on, or that people are asking about something that is so several months from now and on the other side of the world, when it's a Contender Series press conference. And usually people are either asking about Contender Series, or they're asking about UFC events that happened last weekend, or they're asking about like really big UFC fights, like title fights or Conor McGregor or something like that. And then, because someone then asked him about Ireland right after that, and he kind of had the same response, just like, what are we doing here? Like, we should be done. And so he did not shoot down the idea of UFC going to China. Like, I mean, I checked with multiple folks, like people that have no connection to each other within the last week. And they've told me like when I say people, I'm talking about managers, fighters that are expecting to fight on the card. Like, this is not, these are like reliable people he's talking to. And they're like, yeah, UFC has told us that the event is most likely going to take place in China, and we are in the process of applying for Chinese visas as we speak. So like, that is the goal. Like, it's not a silly thing. It could fall through. It very well could fall through. The reasons why UFC China would fall through is for two things. One, if something with the venue doesn't work out, if it's booked, or someone comes to the arena and says, here's a ton of money for us to be able to hold a show at this event on this date, and they can't do it. Honestly, like, there's other options too. Like, they could go to Beijing or Shenzhen, like they already have. But yeah, Shanghai is the target. So arena issues, that's one thing. The other thing that could get in the way is if they, kind of like what happened with Korea, where they didn't feel like they could have a good main event. They wanted to go to Korea. They really, really wanted Zombie to be the main event for that show. And that fell through. And so they decided to hold the event in Las Vegas. But yeah, so that would be the other thing. And but with that, you have to think about what they've done in Shanghai already, or in China shows already. 2 of their 3 China shows didn't even feature an Asian fighter in the main event. The first Shanghai show had Michael Bisping. It was supposed to be Gastelum versus Anderson Silva. It ended up being Gastelum versus Michael Bisping. Second China show was Francis Ngannou versus Curtis Blades, the rematch. And then it was only on the third China show that they had Zhang Weili fight Jessica Andrade for the title, which is another reason why I'm confused they're not going to do Zhang versus Yan in China. But they don't necessarily even have to have a Chinese fighter to be the main event. They can put other fights in the co-main event, all fill it up with Chinese fighters all throughout the card. Of course, if they're going to do Road to UFC on that event, then they've already got a handful of fairly well-known names within China, and like Yi Jia, Li Kai-Wen, guys like that. And yeah, obviously, like, having the event in China having the Road UFC finals in China is the best place in the whole world they could do it, because those fights mean more to the Chinese fans than they would any other fan base. Like Li Kai-Wen is going to probably get like a pop from the crowd when he walks in, where he's probably not going to get that anywhere else he would fight at this point in his career. Same with like Ija. So yeah, it makes all the sense in the world to have it in China. They've had a lot of time to ramp up to that. Shanghai is their headquarters, their HQ in Asia. So I still fully expect it to be in China, but it's like, yeah, they've still got, if Zhang Weili and Yan Xiaonan's not gonna happen at that event, if neither of them are going to fight at that event, you still could do like put Li Jingliang against a really, really well-known fighter, which yeah, it wouldn't be the most, because like, yeah, at this point Li isn't ranked. I think he's coming off a loss, so it wouldn't be like the biggest main event that they could do in China, but it would still, like, he's still very popular there. Put him in there against, yeah, like a Tony Ferguson or someone who's really well known, and I would be happy with that, especially. But I would say probably their first choice, if it's not Zhang or Yan, would be like a Song Yadong fighting another bantamweight contender. If Song is healthy, I have heard a rumor about Song Yadong's next fight. It could happen at the China show. So yeah, I'm checking in on that. Probably I'll actually check in on that later today to see if I have an update. But yeah, I would say the most likely outcome is that we get Song Yadong in the main event. That would be where I would put the most money right now. However, you could get like a Yan Xiaonan versus like a Tatiana Suarez, maybe. You could have that. So I don't think that's as likely as a Song Yadong fight, but it's likely. I bet you'll get Li Jingliang in the co-main. He's already confirmed that he's fully believes he's going to be fighting at that event. So that's my 2 cents on that. But yeah, with that long intro, let's get into your questions. Thank you, Makoto, for that. Making fun of someone else's English or country of origin is unacceptable in the chat. And yes, it is really hard learning a second language, so please be mindful. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I have attempted to learn like so many languages by now, and the thing that would probably sets you back the farthest is if someone like makes fun of your language, for sure. Yeah. What is the problem of having a judge being interviewed after submitting a bad scorecard? I was interested in Dana's response to that as well. He, at that same Dana White Contender Series post-fight press conference, he also, because they were talking about that at the press conference, that scorecard at the main event last Saturday, and Dana said something like, yeah, I can understand why the commission wouldn't want to parade their judges in front of the media and have them interrogated. Maybe that wouldn't be the best the best practice to regularly do, to have them to the media. But I think at the very least, if they were to just submit some kind of written statement, I think that would be the best way to go in terms of feeling like we have some accountability. Because the thing is like, judges are not used to being in front of the media. So whereas athletes are in front of media a lot, they're used to that. And it's like, yeah, a judge doesn't sign up to be like scrutinized by the press on live TV. It's not part of their job. I can understand that. And people that aren't used to that, I don't know, maybe that could go wrong in some ways if they're not really apt at communicating their thoughts clearly in front of in a press room. But I think the way to go would be to be able to submit some kind of written statement where they're, and and what qualifies as needing that. I'm not really sure how you decide that, but maybe that's just whoever runs the athletic commission, if they feel like it's necessary to provide accountability and clarity, that they would have to submit a written statement. So yeah, that's what I would say, is I would want to have them do that. So yeah, I read that. Sorry, that's not really answering your question. And part of that is because I don't really know why Dana was so like, yeah, we wouldn't want to do that. But Koda saying, I read the heartbreaking story of Angela Lee on the Fighters Tribune. Good gracious. Why is one pushing the younger Lee sibling? Talking about Christian Lee. Maybe don't pile a ton of pressure on a super young prospect again. Is that would you call that a lack of self-awareness by one? I have not loved how One Championship has guided the careers of the Lees, which can be surprising because on the one hand, they have put, like what you're saying, they have pushed them so hard. They have made them the epicenter of their organization and given them so many resources to succeed. They've told their stories. They have basically just given them the keys to the kingdom. But I feel, and to the degree that so many people have accused One Championship of showing favoritism to the Lees, which I could definitely see an argument for that, and I kind of feel that too. Kind of hard to fully understand and judge that, but I agree. Like at this point, you've got Christian Lee, and I guess it's Adrian Lee that's the youngest one. Yeah, Angela Lee and Victoria Lee were obviously under a ton of mental pressure, a ton, while they fought in One Championship. And I definitely don't want to say is like it's One Championship's fault that they it's hard to break all that down, and so I'm not going to point fingers at anybody, but I feel like if you're going to like give a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old that kind of platform, and you have that in the UFC too, right? With like Raul Rosas and I guess Chase Hooper kind of has had it to a degree, thinking about these really, really young fighters. But even Chase Hooper, it's like he got to fight a handful of times on the regional scene, as did Raul Rosas. And that is like so important, I think. What I would prefer One Championship do, because they want the Lees to stay fighting under their roof. They really want that. So give them some kind of developmental deal where they can fight throughout Asia on really small shows. And like, it doesn't mean you have to ignore them, but just like let them, I think it is so important to let fighters have an amateur career if they want that. It's important to let them fight on the regional scene for a while if they want that. Like, even like Bellator fighters, like Bellator will sign fighters from the bottom up, where they're signing them as 0-0 fighters. You see that with a lot of those like really those big wrestling fighters, coming from wrestling backgrounds. But even those guys, like they'll fight on the prelims for a while, and they're not the star of the show at all. And I feel like yeah. There's, again, I'm not pointing the finger at one, but I think that they would really serve any fighter that they have that is a really big prospect fighting at a really young age. If they would maybe do some kind of developmental deal that says like, hey, you're going to fight 4 times outside of One Championship. It can't be for these promotions like, UFC or Road to UFC. Or a Bellator PFL. And then after you fight those 4 times, then your next fight after that has to be for one championship. I don't know. I mean, that's a whole other deal if that kind of contract is fair, but just like let them live under the radar a little while and then bring them in, because yeah, like Victoria Lee, from the time she started with one championship, there was features and it was all like Angela Lee's younger sister, Christian Lee's younger sister, and yeah, I want to be really delicate and really careful with this conversation, because let me stress again, I'm not saying one championship is at fault for that. That is, it seems like it's a lot bigger than that, and but yeah, you're and so I'll broaden the net to include any MMA promotion. Let fighters warm up to fame. Let them warm up to that, and let them be a nobody for a little bit, for sure. Let's see. So asking about why reporters bring up to a fighter, so-and-so said this, how do you respond to that? Is it just a way to instigate or get the fighter unfocused? I don't think, it's so many times when reporters will ask fighters to respond on the comments of other people. I don't have a problem with that question in general, but so many times when they say that, the fighter hasn't heard that other quote, or they don't care. Yeah, I don't think the media member is trying to get the fighter to be unfocused. It's a way to generate headlines and stories. And yeah, I was emailing with a guy this week, one of our moderators, about that, actually, of just like how like so many headlines, and this is bigger than MMA media. It's also sports media, and it's bigger than sports media. It's any kind of media, including like politics. So many headlines that you see are reactions to what other people said. So it's like these very public dialogues, and we have those headlines because we read them, essentially. Yeah. Is the MMA Hour just a platform for MMA fans to mock what fighters have to say? I've never seen any positive fan engagement come out of the MMA, Ariel Hawani's show. I haven't really watched that show that much recently. I'll tune in occasionally if there's something that interests me. So, yeah, I think you have to realize how broad of an audience. Like the MMA Hour is about the broadest fan audience that you can get. So there's that. Do you think spicy question here. Do you think the cultural appropriation of UFC Noche was embarrassing? I normally call out the lack of attention to Asian Heritage Month due to Dan Tom and Drake Riggs, but this is one of the times I'm glad they don't do it for Asians. I know. There was like immediately a lot of questions about like, oh, are we going to do this for like this culture and this culture and this culture? And I'm like, yeah, I don't know about that. Like, I don't know if that's a great idea. It's like the most accessible, I think, for Mexican culture, because there are so many Mexican people that live in the U.S. So like you can have an event in the southern part of the U.S. that's Mexican focused, and you could actually get like a majority Mexican crowd there, and there's a lot of fighters that you can put on the event. I don't know. Yeah, cultural appropriation. That's a tricky question. I think if there's a couple different angles you could look at that. You could look at that with a really cynical outlook and just say like, this is just a marketing ploy to like sell, basically, like, yeah, using Mexican culture just to like bring in more dollars and make money, which like, it's like, yeah, but like, don't we do that for a lot of things? Like, don't we do that for like, I mean, like the UFC is always using culture as a way to like sell to certain audiences or put a certain image up, like you could have a cynical outlook towards like having shows at U.S. military bases and, you know, having sponsorships with the U.S. military as like this very like patriotic visage as well. So you could be cynical towards a lot of that stuff, and the UFC and every brand is always doing that. They're co-opting other different like different markets to try and sell to them. I think what the question I would want to have is like, were like Mexican people a part of planning Noche UFC? That's what I would want to know, and I think that is when you can start to dismiss some of the cultural appropriation questions. Because yeah, if Noche UFC was just planned by a bunch of white dudes, like you get into some cultural appropriation. But I think if you have like Mexican and Spanish speaking people working that event and kind of making a lot of the design choices, I think you can avoid a lot of that. And it's like, yeah, if they were to have some, I don't know how this would. It's like as soon as you think about that with other cultures and countries, it's like this could go to some really strange places. Like yeah, they probably wouldn't do that for like a Chinese event. Having lots of fighters from that country is about as far as they'll go. But as far as like the branding of it, where they're playing like mariachi music is like the lead in, they're changing the color scheme of things, like doing that for other countries. For some reason, I just feel like that wouldn't land as well. I don't know, maybe it would. That's something I'll probably. These are questions I'll probably be thinking about late at night in bed. Thinking about, would this work? Could they do this? Like Valentina Shevchenko brought up the question of, we need to do this since like we did this for Mexico, we need to do this in Kyrgyzstan next and do it on like a Kyrgyz holiday. And right away when she said that, I went looking into like, could they even do this in Kyrgyzstan? Like, is there even, because I've never been to Kyrgyzstan, is there even a venue there that they could do a big show in Kyrgyzstan, in Bishkek, the capital? And first of all, there's no venue that they could hold a UFC event in Kyrgyzstan right now. The only like MMA events in Kyrgyzstan right now, like Niza has one coming up on October 7th in Bishkek. I was like, where is that? Where is that venue? What is that? And it's like a 7,000 seat sports venue in Bishkek that was built in 1974 by the Soviet Union, and it is old. It is so old looking, and that's like where you go. There's no basketball arena in Bishkek or in Kyrgyzstan, especially not a modern one. I'm like, yeah, the UFC is not going to go to Kyrgyzstan and put a bunch of Kyrgyz branding all over everything. That would be really strange. So, yeah, very interesting question for sure. Asking about Valentina fell because of Mike Bell. Oh yeah, a lot of criticism towards Valentina. Asking about, after Valentina complained of the 10-8 round, the commission held a meeting and Mike Bell was not there. The two other judges were not in attendance. Yeah, the commission came out and said that like Mike Bell had a prior commitment that prevented him from coming to that meeting. That whole thing was just like really fishy to me, because there have been so many terrible scorecards in Nevada, and we never do this, but this one, so I'm like, why have we not done this before? Why is it 2023 and now we're having like a meeting with all these judges to talk about 10-8 rounds? So that's a little bit weird to me. Why are we doing this now? But then like, yeah, I don't know. Is Mike Bell getting some kind of corrective action? We have no idea. The athletic commissions, they're not actually there for the fighters. They're there to cover their own skin. They're there to partner with their state's tourism board. and they're there to be the promoters' buddies. Athletic commissions in the U.S. are usually not there to prioritize being there for the athletes, unfortunately. And that is one big, I mean, yeah, that's a whole nother rant that could go on. You're asking about Valentina Shevchenko, but oh yeah, what a mess, guys. What a mess. I have a lot of thoughts about that. I need to go back and watch that fourth round. I scored that fight 48-47 for Alexa Grasso. So even if like, so I not only do I disagree with the 10-8 rounds, like all of us do, but I disagree that round should have been scored for Valentina at all. So like I disagree with a scorecard for Valentina Shevchenko. But the fight was like at least kind of close. But yeah, really, really weird stuff. Asking about why reporters like to bring up to a fighter. Oh, okay, yeah. Must have been a double question. Are you familiar with Saori Oshima? Yeah, sort of. I heard of her 2 years ago on Drake and Ghost's Phantom Punch breakdown. Ghost said that she often gives up position to attack subs. I have not watched her fight a whole lot, but I am familiar with her. Yeah, very good grappler. I mean, it's, as far as the microweight division goes, she's the queen of that division. So that's one thing about this fight last time is that she did go up. Was it to strawweight or to atom weight? She went up in weight to fight Park Seo. So there is that going for her. I would not say I'm super familiar with her game. Will that work at the highest level, giving up position to attack subs? How do you see Oshima versus Izawa going? I favor Izawa in that fight. Izawa is a lot bigger. Probably not going to happen since Oshima just lost. Yeah, totally. Yeah, be interesting if we had like Park Seo versus Seika Izawa and Rizin. So like so few options left for Izawa right now. Something's got to change for her. To build on the question about judging, why don't they fire incompetent judging? You know, like every other job, if you do a bad job, you get fired. That is tricky. I've seen there's been referees that have been prevented. That is sometimes happened with referees. With judges, and I'm just trusting Nolan King's word on this. Nolan King is a really good reference for like commission kind of stuff, judging referees. But he says that Mike Bell has one of the best overall reputations as a judge, and just like, I don't know if he was distracted by something and just wasn't watching the fight. But yeah, it's kind of like if you are think about it this way. If you're really good at your job, if you have a really good reputation, your bosses like you, and then you have a really bad day, now like stealing from a company or like, yeah, or just royally effing up like something really big could still get you fired. But if you make a really big mistake, you're more likely just to like get a talking to, get a slap on the wrist. So probably his track record is what saves him here. But the world of commissions seems like such a mystery to most. And there are some commissions that do a way better job than others. Honestly, like the state where I come from, Kansas, is one of the better commissions out there. I feel like they're a pretty solid commission. California has been a really good commission. New Jersey, I feel like it's been a pretty good commission. But a lot of the commissions in some of the southern states, like and then like Utah, Nevada, like just a total circus. So yeah, unfortunately, commissions have really worked against themselves to build trust, but there are no repercussions for not building trust, which is unfortunate. Any updates on Road UFC fighters last season that will make their debut? Only heard from Jekka and Korean Tiger. I know Korean Tiger targeting December, Jekka targeting October, said on Insta Live. October is filling up quick, so I don't know if October is doable. More likely November, where there are still spots. Yeah, I would think Lee Jong-young will probably fight December 9th if he can get on that China show. I need to check in with Park Sung-hyung's side. As far as I know, he's ready to go, so maybe he could fight at China. I need to check in with him. Anshul fighting at UFC 294 in October in Abu Dhabi. I hadn't heard about that Insta Live with Jekka, so that's good to know. I would think, yeah, October is pretty much full and just around the corner, so that's probably not going to happen. I would think for him, it's more likely. I think you'll probably see Jekka fight at like an Apex show it could be the November 18th show. I'm not saying this with any authority or knowledge, but just seeing kind of where Jekka is at. He's training out of San Diego. Let's make basically like the easiest like path for him. So let's get him on an Apex show, either November 18th, or I heard yesterday at that December 2nd show, which has had like 5 different rumored locations, could actually be at the Apex as well. They reported that was that sorry guys, MMA. Oh no, it was MMA Mania, because it was Drake Riggs and Alex Bahunin, the Misha Tate versus Julia Vila fight, going down on September 2nd, potentially at the Apex. So yeah, probably I would think if Jekka is trying to make his debut as soon as possible, they'll get him on a show November 18th or December 2nd. They could throw him on the China show, but I don't know if there's any hoops with visas. So yeah, it makes sense to me that you get him on the on like an Apex show. As much as that hurts, seeing a guy as popular as him fighting at the Apex, yeah. That's what I think. Jekka is a guy I'm not super connected with. I know some people that kind of know him, but I'll see if I can figure something out with Jekka, but don't be surprised if someone else breaks that news before I do. Mola Sport seems to be the guys that break that news first. So yeah, but you'll probably hear about that really soon, because the cards for the rest of the year are filling out quickly, right? Weekly Zhang Wei Li update question. That's hilarious. You said you X'd that Dana shoots down. That's first time I've heard someone use that verb, X'd. That's so funny. That Dana shot down Zhang versus Young in China. Good. Okay, yeah, I think I commented on that earlier. I'm guessing why. I don't know why Dana would not want to do that fight. Like, someone give me a good reason why you would not want to do a China versus China title fight in China. Like, that would be the biggest fight. That is literally the biggest fight that could happen in China right now. The biggest fight. Like, you want to talk about like massive viewership numbers. You want to talk about like gangbuster numbers doing at the gate at Mercedes-Benz. You just want to talk about a fight that captures the imagination of China and grows the sport in China. Like, that is the fight. So I don't understand why you would do that. The only reason, if I'm trying to play devil's advocate from the UFC's perspective, because I'm looking at last weekend's title fight where they were like, yeah, we did record numbers on ESPN Plus. The thing about that is that, one, that was in US prime time. 2, it was on ESPN Plus is only in the US, but you have so many Spanish speaking and Mexican fans in the US. So that's why it does really well on ESPN Plus. But with the Zhang versus Yan fight, Now you'll probably do really good numbers on Migu, but as far as like, so that would be on ESPN Plus because it would be early in the morning. It wouldn't be a pay-per-view because they've got 296 the week after that. So it'd be on ESPN Plus. It would be early in the morning, so you probably wouldn't do huge numbers on ESPN Plus, despite it being a title fight. So it may be like a broadcasting issue that they wouldn't do that. Now I know they did the Shenzhen fight in China on ESPN Plus, and that was earlier in the morning. But I don't know. Maybe they feel like Zhang Weili is a big, like they would rather put her on a pay-per-view slot. I don't know. They have their own ways of thinking about like, yeah, we put these fighters on these certain cards on these either pay-per-view or on free TV or on ESPN Plus or whatever. They have their own categories that they put fighters in that probably is a little bit above my head and my knowledge. So that's what I think it probably boils down to is just broadcasting stuff. But I feel like that would be an investment into the Chinese MMA market that would pay off so richly. I mean, that would just be the talk of the country, Zhang versus Yan, right? I mean, y'all are always asking me about that. It's the perfect fight. I don't understand. You're saying, yeah, Weili is universally loved. It was at 288 when Yan KO'd Andrade, and people were still booing after she won. Yeah, I mean, just the fact, like, you all are always talking about, like, Zhang versus Yan, not only in, like, a competitive standpoint, but in a fan base, like, the fan perceptions, either, like, for or against. It's just like, yeah, there's so much heat behind that fight. Not even like Zhang versus Young don't like each other, but the fan base, yeah, it's perfect. I don't know, totally. You like it when contenders have to scratch and claw their way up to the rankings and never get a title shot off of it, like Beneil, Dariush. And it's funny because Dariush is annoying outside the cage. Yeah, I agree. He is a little annoying. Well, Dariush, I feel like he had a pretty like standard climb up to the top, and then he fought Charles Oliveira, who like destroyed him last May, and that was supposed to be a #1 contender fight. So I feel like for him, it's not like he was at the top just like knocking off contenders one by one. I feel like welterweight is a little bit of a different situation where you've got like Bilal Muhammad, who deserves a title shot, in my opinion. And, you know, lightweight, you had these guys for the longest time. Habib was that guy. Tony Ferguson was that guy that was just sitting at the top for the longest time. But yeah, so yeah, Dariush. I heard a rumor a long time ago, and this was a public rumor. It wasn't like an insider rumor, but that maybe he was going to fight Tsarukyan at UFC 294. And as far as we know, like the last time they posted a graphic of the 294 main card, even like a week or two ago, there was a blank spot where it said like TBA versus TBA. So, and you know, Dariush of Kurdish background and Tsarukyan kind of falling in that same time zone felt like the perfect fight for that UFC 294 card. So I would love that fight. That would be an amazing fight. So hopefully we get that at 294. Superlek missing weight. Well, one's weigh-in and hydration system, one thing. There's that. A lot of weird stuff happens. So many questions about Superlek's motivations going into this fight. There was that really weird quote that came out where he was like, yeah, I'm really burned out on fighting. Don't really want to fight anymore. Would rather just do seminars and coaching, which was really weird. There's like so many awkward narratives going into that Muay Thai fight tomorrow. I don't really know enough. Like I don't have the analytical mind to be able to like choose a winner in that fight. But yeah, really weird vibes. Such like the weirdest vibes going into that fight tomorrow. So weird. Do I know it's the Pancrase 30th anniversary? Yeah, I do. How do I personally rate Inoue? She can't be that good if Lemos be here. I know y'all are not the biggest Lemos fans. Well, I mean Lemos is at least a top 10 at strawweight, so that's something. Mizuki Inoue has only fought twice in the UFC. All of her losses, like, let me read you Mizuki Inoue's losses. Short answer to the question is I don't know because she's been off for 3 years. She has really good boxing. Her grappling is pretty good. Entertaining fighter. Been fighting since she was a teenager. She is 14-6. Her losses come to Amanda Lemos, former title challenger, Vina Jandiroba, in Invicta. That was an Invicta title fight. Jandiroba ranked UFC strawweight. Alexa Grasso, current UFC flyweight champion. Karolina Kowalkiewicz, and these are all in Invicta. Grasso was in Invicta. Kowalkiewicz was in Invicta. Kowalkiewicz, former UFC title challenger. Emi Tomimatsu, kind of a JMMA legend. Oh, and I'm seeing that was a loss result overturned due to Inoue missing weight. So she in theory won the fight, but only lost because of the scale. And then her first loss was to Ayaka Hamasaki, who we know is one of the very, very best women ever to come out of Japan. So those are her losses, her 6 losses. She has been fighting really good competition really since the beginning. So she's very a very mature fighter. She's 29 now. I'm like kind of refraining from putting out a judgment on Inoue and like her ceiling until I see her fight this Saturday. And really that's just a get your toes back in the water kind of fight. I feel like if this fight happened back when she was active, this would have been like an easy win for Inoue. But this is, I think, just to get her toes back in the water. Although I will say Hannah Goldie has been underrated and underestimated in her last couple fights. She hasn't always looked bad, although her last fight she lost to Molly McCann by spinning back elbow and punches. But yeah, before that she tapped Emily Whitmire with an armbar, and she has also fought pretty tough competition as well, and a very really physical fighter. So I don't know. There could always be an upset from Goldie, but back in the day, I would have said this is an easy fight for Inoue. I'm withholding really saying much about her ceiling until I can see her fight this Saturday. Oh yeah, are you a fan of Kid Yamamoto, who passed away a few years back? Fought in Pancrase. Oh yeah, I totally was. I would consider myself a fan of Kid Yamamoto. He just, I don't know, just like this. He just had the vibe, man. He had the vibe, just like his walkouts, and I loved his fighting style, just like leaping in there and knocking guys out. He was so cool. I just had so much hope every time he would fight in the UFC that he would be able to continue. But just the UFC was just never the place for him. Just being another fighter forced to walk out like everyone else and like just getting buried on the prelims. Like he deserved to fight in places like Dream or Pancrase. Yeah. Dream is really where I remember him from. And he was like one of those guys that I would like, look up all of his highlights and watch his fights. He just had like such like the coolest vibe. I can't really put my finger on it, but You know it when you see it, and I was a big fan of him for sure. Charles Johnson, who had a good fight with Mota. Yes. Okay. Then yeah, maybe I'm mixing that up. Horiuchi also had a really good fight. No, you are right that Charles Johnson, that was the fight I was thinking of. Horiuchi had a fight. I thought it was his when he fought for the title in LFA. He actually got like destroyed in that fight. Can't remember what fight I'm thinking of. Maybe it was when he fought Charles Johnson. That's the fight I'm thinking of. Charles Johnson versus Yuma Horiuchi. Because that went to that was a main event. That was for an LFA title. That's why I got it mixed up, is because they're both title fights. That was an amazing fight, Johnson versus Horiuchi. Do you think there's any discrimination amongst the UFC fan base? I don't know. Is water wet? Why is the fan base like that? Why can't we just enjoy who these fighters are and what they do? I mean, how long do you have? Like, how long do you have for me to talk about why there's so much discrimination in the UFC fan base? Well, I think really any fan base where there's a lot of national identity at stake, then there's going to be discrimination. You think about like comparing like the NBA, because there's a lot of discrimination in like professional soccer or professional football, right? Because you have like a lot of country versus country stuff, but in like the NBA, you'll have athletes who are Ukrainian or I don't know, German. But and then in Major League Baseball, you have a lot of guys from like the Caribbean, Latino America, even some from Japan. And it doesn't feel like there's as much like racial tension because it's not like, you're not pitting. There might be like city versus city rivalries, but there's not like national rivalries. Whereas in MMA, there's a lot more of that at stake. And I think a lot of the political leanings and political beliefs lean into that as well. And not even just from like a racial sense, but I would say even like a gender way as well, because like all the different ways that different cultures perceive gender, and kind of like MMA being at its base a very like machismo kind of sport. There's a lot of discrimination against women, or just vastly different ways that women are treated. And I actually read a whole book about this. There's a book on my shelf. I'm trying to see if I can spot it, because I'll bring it over and show it to you all. Give me just a moment. Let me do a small book report. Here it is. There's not a lot of like scholarly books that you can read about MMA and MMA culture. This book, Fighting Visibility, Sports Media and Female Athletes in the UFC, by Jennifer McLaren. McLaren is an assistant professor in Department of Radio, Television, Film at University of Texas in Austin. One of the funnest books I've ever read. Highly recommend. Again, that's called Fighting Visibility. You see the image of Rose Namajunas on the front. She talks about the differences that men and women are treated in the UFC. She also gets into some like fighter pay kind of stuff. But yeah, kind of like, how are women represented in the UFC? What's the branding like? What are women asked to do in the UFC that they're not compensated for? Things like that. Whether you agree with her positions or not, really interesting read, and a really like accessible read too. Like, I feel like most of y'all could. It's not like I say scholarly, but it's really accessible. But yeah, I think there's a lot of that as well. I literally had a conversation with an MMA manager a couple days ago where we were talking about how misogynistic a couple like really, really key figures are in MMA. And he was like, yeah, like you probably knew this, but like this guy and this guy and this guy, like this big manager or this really popular fighter, like he was telling me some experiences he had where they were like just really, really degrading to women. And I mean, yeah, not always the kind of conversations I want to have over the live air. If you were sitting on the couch, we could talk about that. But yeah, there's a lot of different influences there. But I think I covered a couple of them. Oh yeah, you're right, Wrestler Jamie. Yeah, I forgot. You're always calling me on my BS. Vugar Karamov's the champ. Why does the Bellator Dublin card have the Ukrainian flag on it? There aren't any Ukrainians there, and the main event is between a Brit and an American. Is that right? Main event of Bellator Dublin, Fabian Edwards versus Johnny Eblin. Are you serious? Is that's a Ukrainian flag? Let me pull this up on Typology to see what you're talking about. Oh, the color scheme of the flag is yellow and blue, which is kind of a weird. I don't know if there's much behind that. That may just be a random design choice for the poster, but like, yeah, like if you just like Google it, you can see like on Edward's name, it's kind of divided in half between like blue and yellow. The background of the flag or the poster has some like yellow and blue lines. That may just be a random design choice, but I can see why you'd say that. Yeah, not trying to disrespect Lamoche or Inoue, by the way. Lamoche lost the fight by throwing in only 21 strikes in 25 minutes, so she cannot be that good. That's my evaluation. Sure. That has to go against anyone who fought Lamoche, like Inoue, for instance. Yeah, I need to go back and watch that Lamoche and Inoue fight to kind of see what the story was there. Why is it hard to make Zhang versus Yoon? It seems like a good fight, not only for the fans, but for the sport. Yeah, I kind of covered that too. I feel like it's the fight to make, both from a fan perspective and from rankings and merit. I feel like everything about that. DM goes to film scouts for Zhang Weili, and he won't tell me anything either. He said, just wait, when a fight's made, the fight is made. I feel like he knows something we don't. Oh, about Zhang versus Yan. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, me and my boys going to go build a 20,000 seater arena in Bishkek. I saw that the government in Bishkek, like their sporting department, was like, we're going to build this basketball arena for martial arts too. And I was like, oh, that's great. And then I saw that it's only like a 2,000 seat arena. I was like, oh, okay, false alarm, guys. Never mind. That's great, but you're not going to attract like huge events there. Zhang Weili is the only one that can headline and generate interest in China. Do you feel like anyone else headlining in China would be a miss? I don't think it would be a miss to have Song Yadong headline. I think he's both just like barely popular enough, but also, which I don't have a strong gauge for that, I guess, in China, but he is a top contender. Like he's a top what is he ranked, 7 or 8 or something. So I feel like that would be a good choice. Otherwise, you could just like get to top ranked heavy. I mean, have like Tom Aspinall and Cyril Gane, would be a weird fight for China, but it's at least like a solid fight night main event, which is kind of what they did in Beijing when they had Ngannou and Blades. What do you think of Lamoche saying Weili held up the division for 9 months? feel like that's adequate time for preparation for a title fight. That's pretty normal time for a title fight. 9 months is not a long time, especially if you've got like a minor injury. That's totally normal. Totally normal. Yeah. Would finding judges be a good idea to hold judges accountable? Well, judges probably don't make a lot of money. I don't expect that they make a lot of money. It's not like you're a fighter. Where paying a $10,000 fine is, maybe I don't know. I don't think that would really work, because I think that's implying that the referee isn't in their mind giving their best effort. Thing is like Mike Bell could have a very reasonable explanation, not reasonable in his mind, reasonable explanation for why he did a 10-8 round. What that explanation is, I don't know. I almost certainly guarantee you I don't agree with it, but he may have felt like he was doing his absolute best. So finding people, I don't know if that's the best course of action. I think that a better one would like re-education and having things like, okay, let's get everyone together. Let's talk about 10-8 rounds again. And enforcing a little bit of public accountability would help as well. I think that's the way to go. I don't know if fines would really do that. Questioner was talking about Adrian Lee. Yeah, totally. I just want to see their family heal, and pushing another Lee sibling doesn't help, in my opinion. Totally. Anyway, yeah, for some reason my comments wouldn't send or even super chat. Yeah, I don't know. Can we get your overall thoughts on Korean MMA and Black Combat versus Deep? Well, yeah, I kind of hit on Black Combat versus Deep a little bit. I mean, they got the better of the competition in both of those. It seems like Korean MMA is in the middle of a big change. It seems like a lot of gyms are getting really, really good. Korean Top Team, Team Stun Gun, Zombie MMA, really emerging as great gyms. You've kind of had your long running gyms like Team Mad, still going strong. But yeah, their gyms, it seems like, have been improving in quality a lot. And when they're like in these like Asian country versus Asian country competitions, they usually do really, really well. Road to UFC was a little bit of an exception this year, but last year at Road to UFC, they did really, really well. The Koreans did. They looked great in their in against Deep and Rizin. They're doing pretty well. In one championship, they're doing pretty well. So yeah, Korean fighters really excelling. But so that's getting better. But in terms of the overall Korean like promotional landscape, that has been in a lot of transition. Road FC totally changed up their format this year, scaled down their operations to just a couple weight classes, fewer events, and then just different promotions seem like they're just changing things up. AFC is doing this like partly in Vietnam, part in Korea, and then a couple other promotions just kind of falling off the map. Like, well, I did see GFC is coming back, but they've been out for a while. What's that really weird one? Gosh, I'm blanking on the name. That really weird name, and they look like the most like low budget shows. Not GFC, Gods something, or they're all like Gods and Angels in Korea. I don't know where that comes from. Gosh, this is killing me. It's because they haven't had a show in forever. I'm like forgetting their name. I feel like my brain is kind of on the fritz today. Like TFC, where have those guys been? Top FC, they haven't held an event in forever. One promotion. And then like Ring FC is kind of coming into the picture a little bit. Double G, that's the one. They've been totally silent for a while. They were kind of like they had a lot of really good prospects. So like the Korean MMA scene is changing a lot. What you're also seeing, I'll point out, is that a lot of Korean fighters are also not fighting domestically, but they're like going to other Asian or like even bigger like Eternal MMA. A lot of Koreans are starting to fight in Eternal MMA, really like starting this weekend. I did see Park Chan-soo, who's a pretty solid Korean prospect. He was supposed to fight this weekend in Eternal MMA, and he had to drop out of that fight this week. But you're going to see a lot more Koreans in Eternal MMA down in Australia. You've got a Korean fighting in Matrix Fight Night next month. You're going to see more and more Koreans fight for some of these Indonesian promotions like Soma Fight and Island Fighters League, especially. So kind of seeing a lot of Korean fighters spread out. And I think that could be in response to some of their talent levels getting better. I talked about those gyms are getting better and better. So I think it's good for them to get outside of Korea a little bit, fight abroad, get some different looks. So yeah, Korea's changing a lot right now. It's really changing. A couple folks have stepped out of the game entirely. So very interesting, very interesting. I'll probably have to cut this off soon because I got some other stuff to do. It's my wife's birthday today, so that's why I would have to cut things off. That's why. Pretty good excuse to have to leave. Oh, sorry if I didn't read the rest of your question. I said it's a good thing for Weili that it's not going to be in China, just because she said post-fight 292 that it doesn't matter where she fights Yoon. I know, it's just like, how much does the UFC, I feel like the UFC has the most to gain in China, and like, yeah, just make it the Zhang Weili show, roll up the red carpet. Like, I feel like it's just a way to capitalize on her constantly growing stardom in China and just let her fight. I mean, that's what you're always trying to do in MMA, right? Have your stars fight in their local audience and grow their star. Is there advantage to having them fight in the Las Vegases of the world, the Madison Square Gardens of the world? Absolutely. That's part of it, but Zhang Weili has done that. She fought Joanna for the second time, or for the first time, one of the best fights ever in Las Vegas. She fought Rose in Madison Square Garden, right? Or no, I'm getting that wrong. She fought Carla at Madison Square Garden. She fought Rose in Florida and in is that Arizona? First Rose fight was Florida. Second Rose fight, I'm forgetting. For some reason, I want to say Arizona, but I could be getting that wrong. I think Road UFC fighters making their debut in Asian shows would be great. Agreed, yeah. Since more Asian fans will be tuning in, but them in US shows will be better because it will introduce them to American fans that don't follow Road UFC. So yeah, but if you could choose, which one would you want to see? I think that's hard. I think like if you're looking at longevity, having a guy like JCK fight in the Apex, which to be fair, he's done that already, but having him fight because I say that for JCK because he's a delicate, very delicate, you have to handle that kind of guy really delicately because he came into the UFC after a loss. And he lost to another guy like coming into the organization. So he's at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of like, especially fighting at lightweight. Like that's such a stacked, talent-rich division. So you really got to handle him carefully, give him time in between fights, let him grow and develop, get him around the right people, and give him what he needs to be at his best. Is bringing him to China, where yes, he's fighting in his like target audiences, closer to his target audience's time zone, where more people can tune in. That's a good thing. but long term, what's going to help him like develop at a steady pace to where he can be in the UFC and stay in the UFC. That's where I'm like, maybe having him at the Apex could be beneficial, where it's like a small crowd. It's at the UFC HQ. Like, it's not that far from where he's training. It's like 4 hours from where he trains in San Diego. So yeah, I personally, I think let's have him fight a very low stakes fight in the Apex first, and then let's put him in an Asian time zone. For Park, for Anshul, I think those guys are a little bit more ready to fight. Maybe on like a, Anshul's fighting in Abu Dhabi, which is a couple time zones away from India. If Lee Jong-young, he's ready for like a big UFC card, I think, even fighting on the prelims. Put him there, kind of in that South Korean time zone. So depends on each fighter, I would say. Yeah, you're right. Matrix Fight Night announced that Herb Dean will be reffing for them. That's cool. So funny how like Herb Dean is like the only referee where it's like a news announcement, like this big like thing that promotions will like boast about, like, hey, we got Herb Dean to come and referee our show. It's like this mark of authenticity. It's kind of cool. Thanks for the book recommendation. Totally. My fact checker, I totally need it. With all the facts that I put out there, you got to think that like every show I'm going to get like a fact or two wrong. So totally. Okay, this will be my last one for today. Random one. UFC in Jakarta doing a fight night. Which fighter do you think could headline the show? I'm thinking guys from Australia, New Zealand, like Whitaker. More Aussies will travel for sure. Yeah, I think that's the way to go, is put a guy like that in the main event. Either like I don't think you do a title fight for that, unless they wanted to make it a pay-per-view. Then like, shoot, all bets are off. Put Volkanovski in there. I know that's a crazy long shot, but Whitaker I think would be a top choice. I think you could also, if it was a fight night, you could put anyone that's like an international star in there. I don't know if that fight even necessarily has to be like a market specific fight. I think that's what you kind of fill out the card with, maybe do a co-main. But yeah, Whitaker would be good. Even like if Dan Hooker got another win, then put him in there, that would be kind of cool. But yeah, that's what I would say. I heard that Jakarta was targeted for next fall, maybe like September. So I know originally I had said I would love to see that event go down in June, kind of like they did Singapore. But yeah, looking like UFC said they would love to do it in September. So we'll see. Well, guys, we went an hour and 35 minutes today. Really appreciate your questions, and hopefully, I know it's like some of your questions I could have talked about for way, way longer, and yeah. So sorry if I didn't like fully answer every question to your satisfaction, but really appreciate you hopping on, especially an hour earlier today. Again, it's my wife's birthday, so that's why I pushed it forward an hour. But other than that, thank you so much, guys. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Catch all the great fights going down this weekend. And with that note, yeah, see you next week. Enjoy the fights.